Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's Melbourne Cup Day here in Melbourne. So, what else is there to do but to talk about space? Yeah, so today we're very excited. So, there's a bit of a test broadcast today, a bit of trying out some new tools and things. So, just thought I'd bring you a bit of a live stream today. And I am very excited about space. There's a lot happening in space, particularly in Australia. A lot of great new startups doing some amazing things. You check the ticker down here. Some of the recent activities over the last 2 weeks. So it's very exciting. So space is the final frontier, as they've often said. John F. Kennedy, President John F. Kennedy Jr. I'll say that again. President John Fitzgerald Kennedy in 1962, on the 12th of September, said these famous words: "We choose to go to the moon and to do the other things in this decade and the next. Not because it's easy, but because it's hard. Space is worthy of our conquest, and it's dangerous. Can be dangerous, but worthy of our conquest. And that's why we are so excited about space." He finished up that speech by saying, space is not contested as yet. Well, we know today that it is. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that today, as we do a little bit of an overview of space and a little bit of overview of space and cyber coming together. So let's move on to our little presentation that I've got here. So space. There are three aspects to space. It is, drum roll, it is critical, so we need it in our everyday lives. It's congested. There's a lot of stuff up there now, and it is contested. So these are what we call the 3 C's of space. Continuing on. So in critical, why is space critical? Well, if you've ever been to a party on a Friday night with drop your kids off and you get that urgent text, "Oh, this party's getting a bit out of control," how do you find that house again without GPS? So GPS is critical. As a parent, it's critical to me, but it's also critical in our life. So what we have is the SOCI Act in Australia, which defines 11 verticals, with space as one of those verticals. Now, in any critical infrastructure, there are 5 hazards. There are technology hazards like IT, architecture, cloud, all those kind of things. There are people hazards. Our people are our greatest asset, but they can make mistakes. And sometimes there's insider activities as well we need to be careful of. Physical hazards around the perimeter, looking after the fences and the gates and the video, all those kind of things. Supply chain hazards are a key thing, particularly when we're using COTS, common off-the-shelf technology, or software open source packages that we include with node package managers and things like that in our software. And there are natural hazards like fire, wind, earthquake. But in space, we have asteroids and solar flares as well. So it's congested up there. Right now, we have over 50,000 tracked objects in the space situational awareness databases. So there's a top 50 watch list that Space ISAC and other organizations who collaborate together in space are looking at. Space situational awareness is a new discipline within space cyber, where we need to know where everything is, because there's a lot of it up there, and if there's any proximity closes or conjunctions between spacecraft that are too close together. So not all those 50,000 are payload satellites. Some of them are rocket bodies and things that have been up there for decades. There are 13,000 satellites currently in orbit, and you will find quite significantly, and I was surprised by this, 20% of them have been launched since 1st of January this year. That's really amazing. So that kind of blew me away when I looked at that. So space is contested as well. So we have a number of different people in space. We all like to think that space is a shared domain that we can all play along happily with, but there are nation states now who are encroaching on each other's proximity with their satellites. Sometimes there's spoofing of GNSS, the GPS navigation systems, and jamming of radio frequency signals. So some of these satellites can move around and take offensive actions against others. So eavesdropping, where two satellites will one will sneak up behind the other. There's the motherships with the undocking other little things that we aren't entirely sure what they are. And we've got orbital changes because of that. And the Space Force has reported that there are dogfights going on between some of the nation state practicing dogfights, not actual ones. So Space Cyber has 4 elements. Firstly, the space segment, which is our onboard systems, our everything that's kind of up there. Then we have the link segment, which is how we talk to the space assets and the in-orbit assets. Then we have the ground segment, which is kind of like what's on the ground, and the users who then use all of these services through the ground segment. And of course, the user segment. So you might understand that the ground segment and the user segment have some level of risk that we understand from traditional cybersecurity, but in space, because it's critical, because it's contested, because it's congested, there's that extra dimension to that. So how does this all work out in practice, you might think? Well, you'd all be familiar with the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Well, in space, we're a little bit different. So on the ground, you might think of plan, do, check, act, and map those into the ISO 27001 standards and all those different phases and the elements and that they work with there. In space, we typically have more of a military space perspective on that, and it's the OODA loop, the OODA, which is observe, orientate, observe, decide, and act. So that is how we do it in space. So what we have instead of the MITRE ATT&CK framework, this is very similar and mapped out on a very similar basis to that. We have, so we'll just have a little bit of a play here and just remember those 3 C's, right? So congested, contested, and critical, okay? So in our Sparta model, which is an absolutely fantastic model, put together, it's constantly being revised and updated, and everyone in space kind of knows what this is now. It's a really great tool. So we can create a new layer here. So let's go and create a new layer in this model. And so you'll be instantly familiar with what the similar layout to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. A big shout out to Miner. Thanks for all the great work you do. It's amazing. So here we have not as many phases always as some of the big MITRE framework, because there are different, there's enterprise, there's OT, there's a whole heap of different iterations of that. This is the space one. So you're going to be amazed. If you haven't seen this before, it's quite amazing. So let's go. Okay, we're on our ground segment, so we know that the ground and the user segment's probably easier to gain a foothold and compromise with. So like if you follow the penetration test execution standard or the Lockheed Martin kill chain, you'll know that reconnaissance is the first step of either of those. Whether you're red teaming or blue teaming, it's always the same. Reconnaissance comes first. So if we were to, gather spacecraft design information. We might look at what we look at. Actually, we might just go back. What we actually want here is, I think, we want to go for a ground segment attack here. So we could go gather launch information. We could monitor for safe, gather supply chain information. Okay, so if we're looking at our supply chain attack as part of one of those 5 hazards of SOCI there in critical infrastructure, supply chain is one of the key hazards. So let's start there. So if we go supply chain attack, we'll do business relationships. So who are these people working with, right? So, but we want to acquire the infrastructure. So we want to attack the commercial ground station. So it's not that we would attack them, but we're just doing a demonstration here. As a red team, you might do this with a company to test and evaluate the weaknesses and vulnerabilities and assess their risk, which is really good. So what this layer does is actually start putting together some of the things. So we can just, I think we can we can, once we've selected now these MAT2, you would have heard from MITRE ATT&CK framework, the tactics, techniques, and procedures, right? So we know from advanced persistent threat actors or nation state actors, quite often they'll have a similar mode of affecting an attack. So here we have the tactics, the techniques, and the procedures. So we've got tactics up here, techniques. All right. So we're just walk through this. So okay. So we've gathered supply chain information. We've looked at our infrastructure. We could compromise the supply chain, or we could just go for a direct attack here, or we could go trust your relationship. Yeah. We're not really compromising the host spacecraft, is more of a space segment. So we're looking at a ground segment kind of access here. So what we really want to do is cross-link compromise neighbor is kind of an in space. So what we might do is go compromise the ground system, which is the one. So we could malicious commanding, or we could compromise on orbit update. Yeah, well, that's one thing we could do. So if we've got access to the ground system, we could now potentially deploy something into the on-orbit update. So if you know your reference architectures, you know some space systems do have Log4j and PostgreSQL on board for their collision avoidance systems. So that was something that caught my eye a little while. That was pretty dated information now, a couple of years old, but I'm sure some of the newer satellites might handle that differently now. So we want to compromise the ground system, modify the authentication process. Let's establish a backdoor so that we can get back in. We'll go for a software backdoor. And then what should we do? Oh, disable fault management. That would be an interesting one. Disrupt or deceive the downlink. Ooh, okay, that's subvert protected actions. Or subvert protections via safe mode. Okay, so that would be a hardware one, not a software. So we could overflow the audit log. Okay, it might be camouflage and concealment and decoys. I think we might go with that one. Debris field, space weather. Ooh, corrupt or overload of the ground base SDA system. Targeted deception of onboard space situational awareness sensors. That's what we'll do. So that one sounds like a good one. So we'll do that here, and then we'll just pop that down. Lateral movement. So okay, lateral movement and privilege escalation is what bad actors like to do. So if we go visiting space vehicle interface, out of band communications link, and we want to deception or misdirection. All right, so we don't want to damage anything today. We're going to do living off the land, kind of want to just stay under the radar for a bit here. Now, are you holding onto your hat? So that is the attack pathway we've mapped. So we're thinking here, we've got ground, user segment, some of the link segment to deceive or camouflage our decoy into the space-based asset. Then you're holding onto your hats here. Here's the good bit, right? So this is what the red team might do to test and evaluate space cybersecurity for a company that either has space-based assets or on the ground. What would the blue team do? The blue team do this. Countermeasures. So if you think about defense in depth, this is data spacecraft software. So, you know, in defense in depth, you have all these layers. So here we have the data is like the crown jewels. We have the spacecraft software, the single board computer, then the intrusion detection prevention, the cryptography, the comms link down to the ground, and then the prevention, which might be, you know, the things on the ground that we can leverage there. All right, so this is an amazing tool. You can actually download the JavaScript. So these are the NIST 5-83 controls that the blue team would need to defend against this, but they might actually talk to the purple team because this is what actually has to be done, and this has to be planned for. It has to be built into the enterprise risk and the risk tables. So this is the blue team might be monitoring and detecting and responding. The purple team would absolutely be looking at the controls that need to be in place. So here, this is just amazing. Like it's such a great tool because all these are mapped here to the NIST revision 5, which is the latest version of the National Institute of Standards. So identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, and govern. So if you go in here, so that's what that is. It's really exciting to have this quality of tools around you to help plan your response. And as we said before, in critical infrastructure, on asset we usually OODA model, but in ISO 27001 and Essential 8 and those kind of things, we would use the plan, do, check, act cycle. And it's in 27001, of course, it is plan and establish, implement and operate, monitor and review, and then maintain and continuously improve. So that's the plan, do, check, act cycle for ISO 27001, which then needs to gather up all this kind of detail from all these fantastic models and frameworks. So I just love this stuff. It's amazing. So I just wanted to share that with you today. It's really quite amazing, and I love talking about it. And I'm going to just go back to the main camera again. So let's go back to the main camera, and we'll just close out with a couple of thoughts. So space is critical. It is congested and it is contested. And that means we need to bring cyber together with space. Generally, our space companies and startups are very good. They're very good at iterating very fast. They generally have a good concept of secure by design in the mission goals and the payload on board the spacecraft. The cyber needs to be right at that table, right up front, because you can have the most secure satellite in space, but if your ground and user segment you're just running traditional cybersecurity without really focusing on some of the key risks there, then that can be your big weak spot. So that's why those four segments are really quite important. So the space segment, the link segment, the ground segment, and the user segment. So hope you enjoyed that today. I do have another slide pack, which I will go through another time, maybe when we do a bit of a longer session. So thanks for joining us today for this little snapshot, me trying out some new tools here and sharing some stuff with you. Hope you're having a great day. No idea who won the Melbourne Cup today, but because I've been busy. So have a great day. Thanks for joining us.